And welcome again to an episode of Hassan in Mental Asylum on Lockdown. In the name of me, most gracious, most merciful. Allah does not like negative thoughts to be voiced, except by those who have been wronged. Allah is all hearing, all knowing. So, let's go again. No, just kidding. About the song, but let's try and listen to the verse without the music in the way. Or, covering the clear reception of what I was saying. It says, and this is verse number 148, so it's well into, the text of the chapter. And it's chapter number 4, which I know from experience is the one about the women, Anisa. And it goes as following. Allah does not like negative thoughts to be voiced, except by those who have been wronged. Allah is all hearing, all knowing. So, what's a negative thought, right? I've said a number of things were controversial to my audience on X.com. Some of you here are not on X.com. Some of you here are. Some of you have heard my, particular opinion about the Spanish language. It's not really an opinion, it's just a fact. I decided to take the fact in a certain light. If I had taken the fact in a different light, you would have missed my interpretation. You would have missed the particular way I decided to look at it. Even though it's something it should occur to everybody on its own. To summarize, since it's been about a day or two since, that was fresh, news for the internet about the Spanish language. Many of us don't speak Spanish. Most people in the world don't, actually, but about, I don't know, a couple, 10 million, do. I think it's in the hundreds of millions, actually, right? So you got all of South America speaking either Spanish or Portuguese. And I think of Portuguese, I can only think of Brazil, which speaks Portuguese. Every other country, Argentina, Chile, Peru, Mexico, Ecuador, El Salvador, well, there are a few countries in Central America, let's say, Cuba again, also Spanish. But you have things like, Jamaica, French Guyana, himself or herself. I'm not sure which one, they say it's a him. So it's a French Guyana and Guyana, both being male countries. They don't speak Spanish there mostly. I guess it's probably French or something close to it. Anyway, but a lot of people speak Spanish. And I've always thought Spanish is a language I want to get around to speaking. It's nice. It's a pleasant sort of a sound. It sounds quick and familiar, Like you can sound intimate. I mean, it doesn't matter necessarily like, showering beads over someone's head. It just sort of feel like that kind of language, that kind of vibe, which is nice, right? So I started to look into the language like, hey, I might as well try learning it because I thought it'd be cool to speak Spanish with my robot. I'm trying to make a robot right now. Yeah, in the process of planning and building and ideating. I usually don't plan my code with pens and pencils. I just sort of describe it to myself, have a clear idea of what should happen, and get around to talking about it to my computer in the form of typing instructions. I have some to-do lists, which you might have seen if you looked at my code on CodePen, but it's pretty much no pencil and pen, not much planning, just me talking to myself about what I want. So anyway, I looked up I tried to find simple things to like interest myself in hearing. So with German, for example, I think of driving directions: go straight, go left, go right. You know, go to the junction and stop. You know, it's far, it's close, things like that. So I can start to make a driving movie or a driving sort of story, in the form of German, simple German, which I should be able to understand. If I just remember, okay, this is what left means, this is what right means, and work using my English, mindset, my English, possessions, to build out a story in simple German which I can write and read, and I think writing and reading simultaneously, and of course speaking out, what you see on the page, and also sort of practicing certain sounds is sort of the foundation of a language. So that was my approach to German, which I haven't gone around to quite yet. For Spanish, I was thinking, okay, if I'm talking to a robot and I want to, ask her what to do things for me, like bring me this, come here, go there, wait, stop, start, these sorts of commands, which you could probably imagine being put into a GPT, aware program that can transcribe sound into text and basically allow me to practice, while writing this program, practice the art of speaking Spanish. So I try to, convert, certain sentences into Spanish, just inspired. I was actually kind of reluctant to do it. I had something else I wanted to do, but it sort of moved me aside from the program I was going to try and write and asked me to try and do some Spanish. I get moved aside by spirits all the time. So this time, like I said, I didn't feel like, doing it, but I went to my Sublime Text, file and started typing in some Spanish, language sentence possibilities. Like, you know, he asked me to bring, the bottle of water, so I brought it. He asked me to put the cat under the table, so I did that. Instead of saying "did that," which is using sorts of pronouns and you know, prepositions, in that kind of way that I don't want to do. Mostly pronouns in this case. I want to simply get direct about it. So yeah, he asked me to put the cat underneath the table, so I put the cat underneath the table. He asked me to put the glass on the table, so I put the glass on the table. So I can see how under and over work in Spanish. Then I came up with some sort of a joke. She asked for a bottle of beer, so they brought her a bottle of beer. He asked for a ashtray, so they brought him an ashtray. And when you look at the translations, people who speak Spanish would know that there's very little difference between the two of them. The only difference between these two sentences is the word ashtray and the word for bottle, you see, or beer. I don't know if I said bottle or a bottle of beer or just a beer. But other than that, cerveza is the word for beer in Spanish. I think it was just simply a beer. She asked for a beer and they brought her a beer. He asked for an ashtray, they brought him an ashtray. That him and her don't end up making a difference in the sentences. So it could have been a male person asking for the beer, a female person asking for the ashtray. These two sentences don't make that distinction clear. So I was asking online, rhetorically, how do you know who did what and who asked for what? If you're running a restaurant in Spanish, you'd imagine that you'd have to do a natural sounding Spanish to make it clear who's ordering what and, how much. So if it looks like, I started to wonder, how do you actually get work done in Spanish? And in my typical extra, I suppose, bull in the china shop way, I started making fun of like the Spanish language and people who speak it. It's not a work language, right? And without having to hear what the actual internet told me, I could tell from the attacks I was getting spiritually that they didn't like this at all. They wanted to simply say bad things about Ghana, bad things about America, bad things about England, bad things about France. These are all places in languages I love, And I'm not saying I don't love Spanish, but it's just not a language for work. I mean, it looks like the language is basically either intentionally or, as a matter of drift, lost all the details required to make, work orders clear, then the writing's on the wall. I don't have to say anything more. So I just simply observed this, and just said, who did what. I don't think that's a controversial thing to say, but they say it was very controversial, right? But just imagine if I just simply put these translations there and let people watch them. Maybe some thinking, oh, phew, he didn't actually, he didn't actually, just 1 second. He didn't actually say anything, too, suggestive about our problems with the language. So yeah, phew, we're okay. But then, of course, there's also the idea that if I just simply went ahead and asked who did what, and people who weren't noticing now notice that this is hard to see. After all, you have to look at the different words and, sort of, parse the sentences, sort of connect beer to cerveza and I forget how they say ashtray, but it's just me pidió. Whether it's he asked me or she asked me, it's still me pidió. You see? So it's not like ella me pidió, She asked me, El me pedio. He asked me. It's like broken French or broken Spanish. Who knows? Because I don't think that's how they say it in actual Spanish. But it's not specific. You don't say who asked you. It's just simply I was asked. And how can that be like a full fledged language if such information is left on the table? Like as a matter of course or as a matter of cultural practice. We need to change things. I'm not saying that all languages are perfect except for Spanish. I mentioned that English has a problem about not mentioning that objects have genders. Objects are alive, they have choices they make, they have, companions they want with them, things that they don't want with them. They have like, jobs to do, they have things to inspire, they have like reputations to acquire over, the course of their natural lifetime. These are all actions which they do, which no one does for them except themselves. So it looks like French understands it, so does Spanish for that matter, that things be male or female. English seems to, consider that kind of like, voodoo or, a superstition. We need to change that kind of mindset and start to call things him and her. So I do it on X. When you read me, you'll see me mention like, I carry the cup to my bathroom and poured him out, into the sink. I'll say things like that which are unusual, but I'm trying to move the language forward as a creative being, and a concerned person for items and the lives they live, in these constructions we don't want to change much, called language. And of course, language is a hell of a, pardon my hard words, but it's a hell of a language, language, right? Like, it just seems like to sound original is to embarrass yourself. You pronounce something the wrong way, oh my goodness. Like, even when I was going to high school, I had the perfect English there, but if you make a certain, a slight, pronunciation error, they all seize upon you and say you ba, which basically means you made a big mistake. And they basically tease you, they laugh at you. Like, for example, I said sword, right, instead of sword, right? Because they give you some sort of, I mean, it's a bit of a story from my childhood, but yeah, they give you some sort of a duty to do when you're in your third and fourth years. You spend your first 2 years being at the bottom of the pecking order, and eventually you. Sorry, give me 1 second. I have to sort of find stuff. Yeah. So they give you like, I also have to blow my nose. 1 second. So anyway, yeah, so at the end of dinners, you know, we'll see dinners. I don't know lunch is included. You know. Oh, brother, give me 1 second again. I have to sort of charge something. Yeah, it's actually all three meals, now that I recall. So after the end of breakfasts or lunches or dinners, you can, during the course of the meal, go to an announcement book and write down something you want to announce. Perhaps you've lost something, you want anyone who's come across it to return it to you. Maybe you're lucky they do so immediately after the meal, because they've seen it or they eventually get around to doing it. Maybe you have a message from one of the teachers that a particular section is not going to be held, and they ask you to get the message to everybody. So, it's one of those things to sort of encourage responsibility and, minimize, whatever that would be. So anyway, I remember one time I was given something to read, and we're going to watch Swordfish, right? But I'm just reading the thing literally, right? So I see sword and I see SWORD. I'm like, sword. Ha 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 ha. Goes a little like light, titter from the audience. It's supposed to be sword. It's supposed to be which. You can choose to say sword or which, but that's not the way we're supposed to pronounce things if we're trying to keep a certain thing alive from the past. And the past does need things to stay alive when it comes to the sounds we make. Right now, there's no particular, court process that can even ask radio presenters and television, personalities to stick to certain kinds of pronunciation patterns so we can keep a connection alive, which will serve us very handily once we start to understand how important sounds are and how we need to start sounding things differently. I mean, Chinese has a pretty serious problem. I'm almost learning Chinese at this point. In the textbooks, or should I say the Zen textbooks, the word for without or none is mo, right? And if you go to Google Translate and type in none or without, they'll say wo, right? So how did mo become wo over time? And the idea of mo is to suggest a cow. a lot of the Chinese characters are suggestive of like farming life and farm reality, and a story that basically is carried out in characters, drawn, characters, getting to different actions and going to different places. It takes a while to master enough of the art of interpreting, abstract and figurative art to be able to understand what happened as a picture, and then of course as you sort of learn what these pictures, denote, you can sort of read two stories at the same time. That takes a lot of effort, and it takes a while to master Chinese. But the idea they've changed the sounds, so there's some sort of a document that tries to teach you how to say them correctly. It looks like the picture is supposed to tell you how to say the sound itself, but that's a lost art. We need to try and get it back. Anyway, point being that languages have drifted away from where they're supposed to be. We live in a very sinful world where any kind of mutilation of a person's property, or or their lives, or whatever the case might be, is allowed as long as it's not against the official rules. If there's a way to get away with it without getting caught, they'll do it. So of course, until there's some sort of police force making sure that language is you know yeah, let me see, around 15 minutes, police force. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So anyway, yeah. Anyway, so that's what happened to Chinese. I'm pretty sure the same thing happened to Chinese. Sorry, they're making me say things now. So the spirits are taking over my body and basically trying to change the path of speaking, which I want to do. But they say it's an important thing to talk about once and for all. And yes, Japanese has also had their words changed. Chinese, Thai. Um, there's no English language that I can think of that hasn't had their language change around. English has, you can sort of see. French has, for all sorts of complicated reasons, you can tell also. Where else? You know, yes. Okay, so yeah, they want to keep going, but I have to stop them. I don't know. A lot of languages require this kind of interest from somebody that's kind of powerful, and yeah, like it's also sort of frustrating to a son. He doesn't have his children to work with him in before him. I want to talk about my children on different recordings, so I'll just mention that Michael Jordan is actually one of my children, not from this lifetime, a different one. But yes, we are working together to try and save basketball and languages too. No, just Michael from basketball from now. No one else you'd know. But yes, right. So yeah, I mean, there's a bit of a story coming up later, but I just wanted to sort of say this is sort of the controversy I've courted, trying to discuss, languages and the art of speaking, the arts of meaning things. And yeah, there's also a sort of controversy I courted just this morning by trying to discuss a Larry Bird story. Before I get into Larry Bird's story, I'll just sort of say, you know, exactly, let's see, 18 minutes. Yes. Okay. So I'm just going to read out the table of contents. So anyone who's basically listened to me up to this point and just wants to know the table of contents, know what's going to happen or what's not going to happen, you know, as I plan to. And of course, is reality what you'll see on the screens and on video. I'm going to try and make this a video too. Yeah. So let's see. So I'm going to talk about Didi. It's the word for eat in tree. So food. Bullet point. Bullet point. Food. A, D, ua, no. Four people combining to commit a crime, or in today's world, be victims of a crime. Eat equals Didi. Tea is not equal to food. What can I take away from somebody that doesn't enter into my idea of killing them? Then, if he puts me over the line, how far out does it have to be before I wouldn't quickly run and take it before I get caught? If it's attractive enough, will I just murder and take my chances? People react to the gain or people react to gain or like of their likes more than they do this for their disgusts. Hell and hellfire description. This is like a sub point underneath the what I just said. Hell and hellfire descriptions of the slyest kind aren't even enough to attract interest in hearing more. Larry Bird, a bird called Larry. Not the first, not the last, but he plays basketball and even did for a living. Supervenient? Want to know what else he did? Not yet. Larry Joe, not Joseph, Bird. Smallish teeth, First in his family to do it. Looks like he couldn't even hand you the ball after he goes out of bounds. Well done. Good hustle. Quote from Wikipedia. However, he dropped out after 1 month, returned to French Lick to attend a local college. The next year, he attended Indiana State University, ultimately playing 3 years for the school team. Bird was selected by the Boston Celtics as the sixth overall pick in the 1978 NBA draft after his second year at Indiana State, but he elected to stay in college for the 1978 to 79 season. Another quote. Bird continued with the Pacers as an advisor until July 2022. Then, after nearly a year's break, returned to the organization in the role of consultant. New bullet points. White legendary basketball player. College basketball player style, nothing too flashy. Michael Jordan's story, no-look three-pointer. He says that's not even entirely true. Being a white guy of a blue-collar but flashy job in a blue-collar town, Boston. What is being a basketball player really? Offense, ball handling / dribbling. Shooting, passing, and rebounding. Defense, stealing, blocking, fouling, setting up screens. Either running, walking. The last one is too bad to do. Without laughing, we can't let you not laugh. It is too hard for us. We can't take it anymore. Let us laugh. Hassan, these are the spirits inside of you asking you to allow us to laugh. You are trying to make this difficult for us. It is not the way, Hassan. This is not the way. I can tell you what your grandfather thinks. He thinks you are too funny to be recording these things. He says this is too funny to even let you finish the rest of what you're coming to say, but we'll allow you. So, after the last thing I said, what will I see that will inspire me to play the game myself? Then Beauty, The Road Not Traveled, as a poem by Robert Frost called The Road Not Taken. I'll read it when it's time to. So they're all asking you to please just leave it at this. It is simply too hard to do what you're going to try to do, which is read your ideas about these things. And it is not okay, Hassan. It is not okay. You cannot do this to us. We will interrupt you with laughter then. Okay. Meetings. Warming up to do a circuit of arm exercises. Plan first, a risk. While planning, leave, a risk. When should one leave? When leaving isn't simply paddling the little canoe out to the meeting room, while you never stop managing to think about what was going on in there. You can't be stopped from thinking your new thoughts. That's when you should leave. And finally, you should never be stopped from leaving meeting rooms. Okay. Now it's 23 minutes. Finished with reading TLC. Then, okay, let's talk about Didi, right? So, some guy was talking. So, I'm in the courtyard downstairs, and I'm trying to give you guys a sense of my daily life here. Not much really be happening. I mean, I have discovered that I am going to be here for the foreseeable future. The tourist who is supposed to have been that to me, you know my story, I don't want to get into details, has more or less given me a place to stay where I guess I'll be watched over all times. I won't eat what they don't want me to eat. I won't, do the drugs they don't want me to do. I won't go where they don't want me to go. And so basically I'm in some sort of assisted living facility for essentially the rest of my life. The governments all know about me. It's a long story about what we're trying to achieve here. But the idea that there's some sort of a situation which I might as well talk about here, but I have plans to talk about it elsewhere. in the books and the movies, you hear about like how one man triumphs against evil. So maybe I think of Erin Brockovich was one woman in that case, but I think she probably has some male person, an assistant who believes in her, eventually handing her the victory because I think she was rendered unable to work, or is there some sort of factory was polluting some sort of river that was harming the healths of the local residents, maybe some sort of galamsey case in Europe or wherever that was. And yeah, she's just close enough to the story. And yeah, she decides to do something about the situation after what will be, about an hour or two of screen time, but in reality on the ground, you just know it takes months or even years to deliver a verdict that, goes in line with justice. Then yeah, you have a sense that actually the world has a number of these, good guy triumphs against an evil system, that is all out for, the profit of a few. What hasn't been covered is the idea that like yes, let's say midway, say after 5 minutes, midway through the masses, right? So yeah, it just seems like I have a bit of a strange system for trying to put these title cards into the videos. They say it works perfectly. Some people prefer to look at the videos and just simply like keep these things in mind. So yeah, I'm doing both now. Yes. Anyway, so moving on. If it does seem like the real situation is worse, it's not like one person against like maybe let's say John Wick's another example. He's trying to basically survive and not be killed by not explicit, by let's say because they put some sort of a bounty on his head. Like we're going to give $1 million or $10 million or something like that to whoever manages to kill him. So if you're just desperate, hungry, and broke, and you can basically afford I don't know, a subway ride, to a location they say he's at, you may get lucky and win. Right? There are all sorts of ways this is used to power almost forever certain kinds of operations for the people who are just simply will continue to get fooled by the system. Not very high quality assassins will basically get interested in this. I mean, if someone says, "Yeah, I'm going to like put $1 million, for like the solution to $1 billion problem we have as a company," you're not going to get much, back. I remember hearing something like a company was giving, rewards to whoever had bright ideas, like about $100 or something like that. The first award they gave, it was to someone who introduced the $100 to something smaller. So yeah, you see. So yeah, that's sort of the idea of like Hassan. He's very funny. He has a lot of funny stories, but he's quite right. They have all sorts of funny ways of funding, problems with just this kind of idea, like lump sum, goes like the winner, and everyone else gets nothing, and there's no way to like make this kind of business illegal until you work something very powerful out. So anyway, if it just seems like that's the idea of John Wick, like one man against, let's say, 1,000 hungry assassins, the actual number is close to like 1 billion. It's one man against 1 billion angry beings. As far as like where would you find these billions? Like you're born and maybe you don't know who these billions are. They're spiritual forces. So it seems like if it just seems like you have to spend something to make a person frightened. You have to spend something to make a certain person hungry. You have to spend something to make a person, shy or like reluctant to like, you know, speak up. Like these things cost a certain amount, you know, everything costs something, right? You don't get anything for free, right? But if it seems like you can roughly equate spirits to like much like the drink, you can't say you had a spirit. You have to say how much of that spirit you had. So of course, like a shot of vodka is different from a quart of vodka, right? And I've drank both before, and they take you to completely different sorts of places. It's not sort of similar at all. And actually, I kind of do miss drinking alcohol. Like it's something which I used to have a little bit of. Right now, the stuff is not going to be very high quality, but it'll be something at least to say I had some. Anyway, I'm not going to get these opportunities for a long while to come. This is the nature of the fight I'm in. Because literally, this seems like I'm trying to basically quantify number of spirits against you. If everybody seems to know that in life you feel, down in the dumps if you have nothing to do, you feel, if you feel like doing something, if you pick up a pencil and try and draw, you start to get embarrassed what you're looking at. if you feel like you're just trying to make, you're trying to learn a new language, you're trying to see how to say, like, die Fülle, you know, which means the plenty, exactly. It's a bit long joke between me and one of my wives. But yes, like if you say full, fulla, like at some point you might stumble across a sound of embarrassing. You're like, oh my goodness, what did I say to myself? I hope I don't say that to somebody who actually speaks German, or if I'm in Germany, I say that someone might overhear me and think I'm, I don't know the language, and let me just go into see how the actual people say it, just to make sure I don't embarrass myself. The same thing happens with people's names. If you read a name online, you wonder how to say it. You've seen Arnold Schwarzenegger's name, you're like, okay, how do I say Schwarzenegger if I meet him in person, or if I meet a fan and they say, oh, that's actually not how you say it. I remember like being embarrassed by somebody because I was saying Terrence Malick. I think I'm saying Terrence Malik because it actually is Terrence Malick. And I was like, okay, that's how the name seemed to me, Malik. But if you understand that it's just unlikely that the name Malik, which means king in Arabic, would somehow find a parallel word called Malik, which doesn't. You see, even to say that word has a certain kind of Arabic sound to it, so you're saying that somehow there's a certain parallel path in English. What language do you think the word Malik comes from? What language? You know, of what culture came up with that sound and decided to name a family after that? But it looks like you have to be very erudite and well read with lots of different languages to be able to defend yourself from people who want to correct how you sound. You just get this sense that there's a certain kind of business in trying to work for the spirits that don't want you to make new sounds, or want you to, be free and open with what you say and what you do with your mouth. To some extent, yeah, it works for like us, like people are not basically, bowlerizing, you know, uh, language, but at the same time too, the worthy, the righteous, the ones who should, the kings and queens, they also underneath this kind of pressure to not sound, creative and playful. So it just seems like if it looks like it takes a lot of spirit to sort of get these kind of results possible. And even just imagine if you have to drink a certain amount of an evil spirit to be able to like be overwhelmed with like enough fear to not do certain things. They basically are pumping lots of spirits into people. We take it into all sorts of surfaces, not just our tongue or just our eyes, but our skin. Skin is not like sealed all the way tight, so of course we sweat, but it also means the reverse is also true. Things from the air get into our bodies as well. So yeah, I'll just say around 32. So it just seems like on a spiritual level, a lot of spirits combine to create the mood of that ends up being our lives. Yeah, as far as spirits are concerned, you're looking at worse than a billion. And they all have lives to live, goals to achieve, and requirements, to survive. Nobody has an easy life. Nothing that has an impact on the world, got it, easily. And the problem is these beings combine to create a large force upon all of us. So it's not like an individual spirit who's just simply malevolent and trying to prevent ambition, anywhere, will be able to convince, Charlemagne the Great, to not wage war, or not, go and inspect a particular village for goodness knows what, right? One spirit alone can't do that. But enough can basically overwhelm you, and you'll succumb to a depression, which would be very hard to explain how come after you're out of it. He is also one of my children. We call him Andrew, yes. So yeah, as you can get the sense that like that's the spiritual realm. The real world is not much different. Like it just seems like people will get up and sort of discourage you as well as the spirits would. Like someone will just correct you on how to pronounce a word. At the same way, when the person's not there, you're a bit weird about saying it in private. Most of the people in the world want to get up and say things. So like I was saying in the original quotes about from the Quran or the Bible too, if you like. Allah does not like negative thoughts to be voiced, except by those who have been wronged. Allah is all hearing, all knowing. So yeah, if man, Allah does not want you to go out and correct people unless you've been personally wronged, then don't do it. But many people, if they hear his advice, won't bother. You know. So yeah, let me write that. 34. Okay, so with that sort of said, I'm still yet to talk about food, but yeah, in that sort of way, you just get the sense that we've got a lot of people coming up against us, and the ratio is just ridiculous. We have basically managed to put all this kind of negative intent into a world in which you might be convinced it's not that bad. But once you start to be extraordinary, you either get rich or famous. They all start coming for you. And if you weren't rich or famous once upon a time, you might even begin to understand where that might come from. After all, the information is they all got rich and famous because they're lucky to have been beautiful, lucky to have been inheriting money, lucky to have had a talent which just came from nowhere, lucky to have been discovered when plenty of people have talents and didn't get discovered, lucky to, have survived a particular, fall from grace when other people didn't. Yes, man, there's a lot of luck that just happens to find them which hadn't found you yet. Lucky to be having sexual experiences when you don't have them. Like this is all sort of things which humanity are just in the water we drink, in the air we breathe, and doesn't seem to be defeatable. Well, now I'm here, God, trying to defeat these beings by being a careful user of computer technology. And so yeah, like now you're hearing me, now you hear what my mission is, and you can see what the problem is. Yeah, so that's the real situation on planet Earth. We have a lot of enemies. The movie of a person, one person against trillions of enemies, has not yet been shot because one, we can't find the opportunity to do that yet. Would love to be able to basically bring people into the real world in which you're going to be fighting spirits. After you finish fighting spirits, enough to continue your studies and work on, whatever it is that you want to work on and become famous at it. You want to have lots of naysayers saying, yeah, what you made is not nice, what you made is not beautiful, what you made is not good, what you made is not useful, what you made is not original, what you made is not, special. After you pass all that and you basically have entered into the market and you're undeniable, like I am right now, and you'll say, yeah, his stuff is just good. You can't help but laugh. You can't help but pay attention. You can't help but look. You can't help but use. Then yeah, you're gonna have the market forces saying, yeah, well, we won't give you any money for it yet. I'm sorry, it's not what we're looking for. Right now, I just know if I went out into the marketplace and just start emailing people, I mean, I'm sort of in a careful situation where I don't need to email people for for business. But if I just weren't in this situation, and I was just sort of assuming that I've made it this far, I'm a writer, I should be able to get a writing deal. The writing companies are just really against all this sort of stuff I'm saying right now. They don't want any of this sort of stuff to enter into print. It wouldn't matter. You just have to think about it. Would you be able to read a watered down version of any of these ideas in a textbook or in a poem? Or because poems are a way to hide these things from the censors, but can you just simply talk openly about one man versus a trillion beings? Too pessimistic, too defeatist, too demoralizing. But it's true, right? I can prove it. They don't matter. You can't sell that kind of book here. But books are an important thing to get, made, as the writer wants. As long as they can find an audience making money, it wouldn't matter. It's not about the money, really. Anyway, so that's sort of the situation we're in, and yeah, I guess that's at this point I finished my talk about spirits. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, food. Right now we're in a time where it looks like the word for this guy Didi, right? He was just basically joking about how he's about to go and eat. Mikar Didi, or something like that. I'm going to go and eat, right? And he's somebody who will never cook. Some people are very proud about how a woman cooks in their house. They have a woman at home who's cooking for them. And don't know what it's like to cook themselves, right? But for somebody to say, if you look at, let's say, the dichotomy, right? You have Didi, you have Aduanu. Like, it looks like Didi is like a kind of playful word, like Didi, like I'm just gonna Didi or diddle, something, right? And it ends up being food, right? Yeah, if you deserve the food, it's kind of a nice place to be, where you worked, somewhere, and ready to basically sit down and play, have a good time, have like a certain kind of like interactive activity. like diddling with something. Yes. Well, that's the idea of food. Like you eat it with your hands, you can eat it with a fork, you can eat it with like a skewer, you can eat it with chopsticks, you can eat it. You can just sort of imagine that food's supposed to be a bit more playful than it currently is. But that's word for eating. The food actually itself is called aduano. Now, aduani is what they say now, but they say the actual way to pronounce it aduano. Adiawanu. That's four syllables. And I was sort of saying to myself when I was, fleshing out these ideas, that's like four people. Adi, wa, and no. Four people combining. So either commit a crime, like saying this is actually food, but it's not. Or if it actually is food, it's going to go to someone who doesn't deserve it. 99 times out of 100. You know? So that's the first idea, bullet point A. Bullet point B, tea, right? So tea is not food. Tea very much is. And so this fake person who claims to be a doctor here, yet one of those recordings, explicit, has basically for about a month now claimed after I, was buying myself tea with my own credit card, my own money, my own credit card, I was buying tea. But apparently, someone snitched on me and said, yeah, he has a card in his room. And so they brought this muscle man, or so he thinks, who's a security guard, plus one of the nurses to come and take it from me. I'm like, okay, why do you need force to take away one of my own things from myself? And so you're doing something very wrong. Anyway, that was a separate issue which has not been resolved for me at all, and neither has been resolved for my family. But the idea that I go to talk to him like, yeah, so can I get my card back so I can just buy the tea? I was also buying other food too to eat, But I think anyway, he's like, oh well, maybe you could, if you're drinking tea 3 times, you don't think tea is a bit much? Are you sure you're not addicted to the ginger? Like, what kind of tea are you drinking? The ginger, it has a certain kind of smell to it, doesn't it? Like he's trying to basically suggest that my interest in tea is connected to some sort of addiction, and that literally maybe I shouldn't be taking tea so much. If I was taking tea like 3 times a day, maybe I can sort of skip lunch. Or maybe if I get tea, like one box of tea a week, maybe I should make it one box every 2 weeks. And I'm like, huh? Like, can't I just simply go back to the way things were? Like, are you trying to tell me? Because you already said that the green tea I was drinking that she used to buy for me is like not good for the drugs I'm taking. So I have to have that canceled because of the caffeine. Which, of course, ridiculous because everyone says that green tea is what you take if you don't want caffeine in your tea. But it's still the tea leaf? But yeah, so okay, now I'm drinking with lemon and ginger. That too, he said has to be taken away for some reason. He doesn't go into it. He's just like, yeah, like, he ends up playing some very strange game with me. And then I'm like, okay. And he said he's going to go and buy me the tea himself. Then the next day, he's like, yeah, so I couldn't find your tea. I'm like, okay, I don't see the complication here. Let me get my card. I can buy it myself. He said, yeah, let me get back to you. It's been about a month since. He hasn't seen me, like, seriously. He came to just sort of come to my room and say, yeah, a plan for you or something like that. We'll talk on Wednesday. That was like last week Wednesday. Or even 2 weeks, So anyway, it looks like he can simply take tea away from me. My own money, my own body, my own, life. But he thinks he has the power to take tea. Then yeah, it looks like it's like taking food away from me. It is. And if it seems like, like I said, if you just sort of take something away from somebody, it doesn't enter into the person's idea of king. Man, it's like a teddy bear for a child. You don't need a teddy bear. Come on. Like, grow up. And you don't take the teddy bear with them when they're leaving the house. Right? Okay, that's a teddy bear. What about the family pet? Like, maybe they'll say, okay, to us, the pet is like remarkably different from a teddy bear. So of course we can't leave the pet behind. Or maybe they say we're going to put the pet in some sort of a shelter and make a new break. Right? As you can see, it doesn't really matter the other person's, idea of what is and isn't killing them. It's their own ideas. And that's the thing. It looks like somebody will just say, yeah, if that doesn't enter, no matter how much of a case you make for it, whatever you're saying is not entering into my personal idea of killing you, then yeah, like, I haven't done that. I haven't killed you, Then, of course, if you say it actually does enter into the person's idea of killing the other person, like, is that they're afraid to cross the line? If it's made rewarding enough somehow, and not by any force of goodness, there's nothing you can do that will actually make a idea of taking someone's tea away from them virtuous. they'll make up all sorts of things to say, yeah, it's actually bad for your health. Yeah, I'm gonna make sure you don't do the heroin. I'm gonna make sure you don't do that. It has nothing to do at all with their personal idea of what it means to take something away from somebody. It's a fun thing to do. If it cost them something to do it, they wouldn't do it. They're doing that to you, not joining some police for to do it to everybody else. And if they said, exactly, it goes on. Heroin's a very particularly, strong matter for some people, but it's important to start thinking more about why people thought they had a right to harass anybody who's interested in this particular plant substance, you know, to the ends of the earth. As long as it's heroin, you have the license to basically make anyone's life hell who's involved in the business of making or using it, you know? But yeah, if it just seems like, you know, it could kill a person to have heroin taken away from them, it just seems like because the system is sort of oriented to make that acceptable and normal or the norm, they will do so, kill the person, and not feel sorry about it, you know? So, as you can sort of see, like crossing that line, to murder someone and come back without getting caught, as long as it seems okay in the eyes of the law that will put you in jails, that will, like, because right now we have things like jails and court cases that are sort of, universal to all, cities in the world. So, of course, you live in a city, you're thinking, wow, if I do this, I might get arrested. But as long as that's not the problem for you, you'll do anything, cross that line and cross it again and again, unless you're moral, unless you start to think of other people and how they feel and, that importance in your life. How other people feel is important to me. It seems like it wouldn't be, but just read enough of my extra column account and you'll see how concerned I am for people, you know? Anyway, so that goes on to, it goes on. I don't want to go into the rest of what I said. But yeah, as for Larry Bird, so there are a couple of jokes in there, you know, and I think all this to me comes down to why do I seem to have it in for him? So it gets a bit funny, but I have to sort of explain the story between Michael Jordan and Larry. So recently on my not YouTube Shorts or whatever, yes, same thing, YouTube Shorts, right? Yeah, they're run by the same company, yeah, Alphabet. So yeah, if it just seems like hmm sorry, I'm sort of rubbing my nose itching, also letting people catch up. So yeah, it just seems like recently I've been getting a lot of Larry Bird content. So some guy I think was it the Steph Curry and a late night talk show host were talking about whether Jordan could have survived in the modern era, you know, of basketball. And he said every time he hears that he laughs because it shows that the person really understands basketball is voicing an opinion without getting into actual basketball knowledge. And it's like a great like Larry Bird respected Jordan, and of course like Jordan is a good man, right? So okay, Larry Bird is dope, right? Apparently that's what Steph Curry is saying. Larry Bird is dope. Okay, noted. That's like the insiders, idea of like who's on their mind as like a great basketball player. I've seen Eminem talk about Run DMC the same way. So like okay, right. So it's like lesser known artists of an art form who should get some attention if he had a chance to shout them out. So I'm okay, fine. Heard about Larry Bird, moving on. Then Jordan has asked himself, like, does he have a good Larry Bird story? He's like, oh man, I remember like it was yesterday. It was a Christmas game, and Larry Bird comes to him like before the game starts or something like that. And he's like, yeah, I have a Christmas present for you, Mike. And he's like, okay, interesting. So yeah, at some point during the game, he does a no-look three. But the problem is the story doesn't really get told clearly. Jordan announces it as a no-look three, but when he tries to describe what happens, it gets a bit confusing to follow along. Anyway, you just assume that what he said at the beginning happened. He made a three-pointer shot out looking. And then, yeah, or whatever the case is, he definitely scored while, Jordan was, doing something, allowing him to see what just happened. And, Larry Bird says, Merry fucking Christmas, Jordan. Right? And so yeah, it's supposed to be some sort of oh my god, like what a guy, like he really can like score and like he's that good at the game. He really can trash talk is what Jordan was saying. He's a good trash talker, or one that hurts. Well, to me at the time I was been thinking so much about that. I was just sort of thinking, okay, so if Jordan is impressed too, I guess I should probably put it, somewhere as a to-do list to look into like, his playing style. All I remember is an unremarkable player. I've seen a couple of his games, or I've seen a bit of him playing. It didn't really strike me as a remarkable player. Just somebody who could basically make the points, And I don't know if he had any championships. He just was a name I heard as a child, growing up. Larry Bird, Shaquille O'Neal, Michael Jordan, of course, Magic Johnson. I think those are all the names I recall. Maybe Dr. J. They had like a bit of a Dr. J thing on Doogie Howser. Um, that's all I can remember. Yeah. As for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, as you can see, I'm not even so sure about his name. You know, these are things that came later. As like Will Chamberlain also one of the names that came later. Yeah, all Muslims, by the way, except for Larry Bird. So it just seems like I'm like, okay, I'll keep it in mind. While I was doing my walking around, hearing these people talk about Didi and this and that and that, you know, I entered into a conversation about Larry Bird, and I was like, okay, well, he's a bird, you know, and he's called Larry, and it's good to have birds be thought of more. That birds can play basketball, birds can trash talk, and birds can be a certain kind of combative. A bird is usually thought of as female, but there are male birds. So I think, okay, this is like something he's managed to do. Like, make us, if you're a Sufi, think about, birds and male birds who are a bit ornery, So that was too much for us. It was a bit ornery. He was dead to us. We couldn't hold it in anymore. Yes, he is a bit ornery. Yes, he has definitely gotten how to pronounce that word, not to spell it. And it's just too much for us. We can't let you go on. It is out of bounds now. You can't get it anymore. You have to listen to us. Sonny is 100% of an asshole. You're going to try and describe how it's something you don't do. It's Christmas, right? And the first thing I was thinking about was, okay, it's Christmas, you should be home, but instead you're playing basketball for those who want a Christmas, distraction, vacationy thing to do. So you are about to hustle and hustle hard to give the people a good game. Yeah, there's a certain kind of like philanthropy involved in that, I suppose. Personally, I think it's for the birds. Yeah, there they are playing for a Christmas crowd. Yeah. Now, it just seems like he said he has a Christmas present for him, and you're thinking, oh wow, maybe you have wrapped something for me in the locker room. We don't play in the same team, but you know me, I'm Jordan, I'm famous, and maybe you thought you could do something nice. Instead, he does some sort of weird thing, scores a point and tells Jordan not just happy Christmas, but happy fucking Christmas. And honestly, you don't swear at a black guy. If you're a white guy, I know you think it's casual and everything, we're in a casual game, but he's still Mr. Jordan. Not really Michael yet. You don't know him well enough to call him Michael. He's just simply a Mr. Jordan who plays in a weird suit which sort of reveals a lot of thigh and arm. But if it looks like they were able to make a tracksuit, which is basically what you can do, put all the players in tracksuits, and if you start going in that direction, it starts a bit weird. If these people are professional enough to come on time, and give you a show that lasts long enough, so you feel like you got your money's worth by attending a game, and they're marketing the sport, they're marketing the shoes, they're marketing the tracksuits, they're marketing all that sort of stuff. It mean really though that the basketball player is doing like games maybe once every season and spending most of the time trying to achieve what the sport wants. There's basically a lot of people respecting it, as a place to discuss things like strategy. It just seems like, okay, we have a fight between the marketing and the technology department, and we're all athletic, and we're all going to say, because we've basically gone through the pros and cons and we can't come to a decision, rather than flip a coin, let's all go out and play basketball. Whoever just fought hardest for this game, gets the decision. Perfect, wouldn't it be? Can it be basketball? 5-on-5 is great. 2-on-2 is great. 3-on-3 is a bit tricky, but 1-on-1 is perfect. It prevents you from having to say, let's go into the boxing ring and sort this out, right? Go to the basketball court and show that literally you have more moves, you have more passion, and at some point you'll just simply, hopefully, laugh off the differences that brought you to a kind of martial, moment, you know, and that's it. So it looks like that's sort of what basketball would like to have happen the most. Absolutely the most is what Hassan says, basketball says. So it looks like the members of the National Basketball Association are associates and brought together in the name of Hassan Abudu, who is Allah for our age, and also in the name of basketball too. It just seems like they're not making enough money by selling tickets and getting whatever you call percentage of the proceeds to run another kind of job for the players aside from scoring points. Then yeah, there's a huge financial crisis problem in America that makes it kind of real that the only thing they can do is just simply keep filling a stadia, hoping that a real estate move is going to finance anything other than survival for the organization without a second possible for basketball him or herself. Let's say basketball himself, yes. So that's my sense of what it means to be a real basketball player. And if Larry's just simply scoring and thinking that's what's going to really grind Michael's gears, he's wrong. But mostly, it just seems like he's not particularly a nice guy who wouldn't do something a little bit more thoughtful for Christmas. Assuming that the whole thing is just simply killing the opponents, humbling them, making them sorry they ever tried to attempt to do what? Play at all or just play you? Are you going to support them play someone else, or just think, yeah, you want to basically demoralize them off the court forever? Like there's a certain kind of kill, 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 kill mentality, which is not what sports is supposed to be about at all, not what the game of basketball specifically is about at all, And if it just seems like LeBron wants to say something, yes. He says he's met him personally. He's a huge asshole, and thank you for basically making it clear that he's not interested in basketball at all. He just wants a job, So yeah, that's what I'll say. So I have about 4 minutes to talk about beauty, because yes, he's not a beautiful man at all, you know. And the idea that literally I'm a good-looking guy is what I say to myself. But until I'm able to understand this fully myself, my family says, and also people from the internet say too, you're the most beautiful looking person we've come across in our lifetimes. Yes. We can't tell why you can't see it, but because you can't and you keep thinking it's all about how smart you are, we get kind of worried that you think smart is all you are to yourself. Because if you only knew how beautiful you looked, you'll try to think more about beauty as a product to work on. Fair. There's just simply good timing for things, and not yet the time for things. So, if it looks like, Larry Bird is funny looking, he just is. If it just seems like the world is full of funny looking people who need to be respected, sure. Let's say Joe Pesci, right? He's a shorter guy, and he's not what I call beautiful, but he's not really a problem to look at. It's a difficult thing to do, realize that you're going to be looked at, for a living. It's a bit funny in the world of acting, because that's pretty much what you're supposed to be getting looked at. They're coming to basically ogle you through one-way glass and laugh at you, right? But if you move quickly enough, you'll see that the person is more interested in what you have to say, the argument you're trying to build, the character you're trying to express, and the goal you're trying to achieve. So you keep moving, you keep moving, keep moving, and eventually you'll see that they don't have time to insult you for what you look like, and understand what you have to say as a message at the same time too. They'll pick the message if they're actually movie watchers, and they'll simply find it a bit difficult to, get you to sit still for an insult. Because of course, if you sort of like look cross-eyed, as a background actor, and you look like him, I mean, you definitely got laughed at by a son of voodoo. He says that is the way to explain why you're the best one to talk about beauty. Thank you for mentioning beauty. It is very good. And yes, it is true. So if it looks like the beautiful are not seen as smart or capable or, royalty even, right? We have, let's say, the royal family, right? You have Charles, who has a certain kind of look about him, which can inspire you to look into his life, right? But he's not what I call the handsome king. Queen Elizabeth II, the one who apparently just deceased, but didn't, is to me, and I'm very good at this, a beautiful girl. However, she's not as tall as the beautiful girl you all remember as creating the idea of beautiful, who's actually Mary, the one from the Bible. She's tall, she's got black hair, and she has a certain kind of like stately that doesn't prevent her from being an American. It doesn't prevent her from being an English girl. It doesn't prevent her being French. She seems mostly French, really, if you think about it. And she is lively, but not so much as to like break the chains that she's like tied in. So she's sort of like kind of like Prometheus, or Sisyphus. She's also been sentenced to some sort of thing, and so she's trying to operate all her work, from within this sentencing. So is Prometheus and so is Sisyphus. So we'll talk about those gods later, but you should understand she's a goddess, and she's the one you all think of as beautiful. And because the queen is shorter than her, has dark hair. I think it's more brown than black, but also it's a bit stately. It's just sort of like glides and sort of like swim kicks her way forward. In her high heels. Not too high. Of course she's a queen. She can't wear like stilettos, but you get the sense of a certain kind of grace that she's supposed to espouse, right? And she has some really nice photographs taken. I think that's sort of a test, really. If you can't get at least one nice photograph of yourself taken, you have a problem. That can be fixed if you change your life. And the problem is not always going to be you acquire the beauty. You can just simply acquire what I call kensho, a full understanding of who you are yourself, you know, which comes before an understanding of everything else outside of yourself, which will be step two. I'm trying to pull people through step two without going through step one, which is basically causing some serious problems for people. They don't know what they can do in a world in which they might be useless eaters. Whom we are coming for? Well, then, what you can do is just continue to reflect on yourself and come to some sort of conclusion in which you might realize that, holy crap, I'm actually destined to be executed in this lifetime, and I've been running away from it all my childhood. I should have been hit by a bus in my childhood, and I ran from it. And now it's time for me to accept with grace, if you can afford that. Yes, everything comes at a cost. Grace comes at a cost, like I was saying about kings and queens who are fake and are everyone else except for the real kings and queens, as far as like who gets the lion's share or even any of a share of like things in life. For example, I don't want to talk too much about it, but it just seems like I'm here working to basically provide free school. These computers are essentially free. There's just way too much power in a calculator even to be priced enough for a kid who doesn't really like mathematics or like beauty or like digital, mathematics and or digits, or like is careful of like holding things and not dropping things. Right now, you can give all sorts of really strange, powerful computers to kids as toys. Yeah, here's this singing calculator. If you can't make one yourself, why do you have access to one? If the only thing was possible, if only making things was possible, then we, the nobility, will be having everything. And you, the ones who don't want to make or didn't bother trying to do hard enough at school to acquire by the time you're 40 or 45 the skills and the know how to make anything you want, then yeah, you won't have anything. That would be fair, which we're trying to get to. But because this huge mass of the lazy have all managed to corner us, the hardworking and the beautiful, and make us work to provide you with all this security, all these dollar bills. If you can't draw, if you can't consider making a dollar bill for a new generation, after all, come enjoy what you want in theory, but when you're about to leave, start working to give the same things you've enjoyed to the next generation. But if you don't care for that, who's going to do that? Well, if you say our children, where are me and Adri's children now? We're too busy working to keep this thing together to have children. She's in America, I'm in America. Attack. I'm in Ghana, Africa. You see, someone basically wanted to basically prevent me from making it too hard a point for someone to basically take. So, man, it's some sort of a joke, yes. Yeah, spirits can control my body very easily. But it comes with some sense of like what I get in exchange for that. Anyway, point being that if it looks like I'm the mind who's basically trying to, in public view of some parts of the internet, which is only about 40%, I understand. Only about 40% of the internet, which not like only. I worked hard for that 40%. But it looks like the 60% are just simply unable to comprehend if they're led into our side. All I've said, not true. I'm too funny to be, in this kind of way, thought of as like, an egghead who's out of touch. I have very simple, clear things to explain to people. You know? Yes, let me see if I can write something here about that. Okay, so if it just seems like, I went over my 1 hour budget, yes, I have. So I can't really go much further than this, but just understand that if I have been working this hard at long last in the public view for some of the people here, I've been doing this every lifetime and as often as I can possibly be on Earth to try and get us, security. Us, the nobles, us, the queens and kings, and us, the ones who have been working to provide all the goods and services you like, and eventually make you all work for us. That's the goal. You need to start working for us. And if you have the capability of working for us, like you can get through this whole bit of reading, laugh at some people, be laughed at by some comments, but get through all of it at some point, it's coming to an end. We're at the last 2-3 months of this. Yes, that's a word from the future. 2-3 months of this is most. Then yes, you'll be able to essentially get a job and survive a realistic life where the ability to buy anything you want is not within the range of the amount you're getting paid. Like I'm saying, you shouldn't have access to a calculator if you can't make one yourself, but make these things free and cheap. So the real price is something you're supposed to say by the time you finish working to make that much money, you can make a calculator, you can make a different kind of digital device, but to save yourself time, you'll simply say, yeah, give me the calculator, and it's not going to break my bank. I'll feel rich using it, and it basically puts me in line with, those who are entitled to own calculators. It should make sense. I can't make it any more convincing or, sweet sounding than that. Anyway. So it looks like the beautiful are all hidden away because I'm a black guy. I'm God, literally him, and I made everything. The designs, the first prototypes, the machines to make the machines that make the things, like that was me. That was me and my wives working together, inspiring me and doing the work with me. Right, so I was first. Let's say they were second. Right, and my children, let's say, were third, who come from my wives. Right, so in that kind of way, right, it's how to put it. Time for a change, and we've all been hidden away from history. Don't get, I can't publish anything I've written so far. I've been hidden from history, so has Mary, so has Adri, so have all the wise. I put in the Bible kind of carefully. So you have to be able to read the Bible really well to be able to see where I put their names and what they did for all of us. But it's basically a story about how to start the world up again, the Bible. Quran's a bit different, but yeah, the Bible's more or less an instruction manual for how to build a world. Now, if it seems like now we the beautiful are kind of a little worse for wear, yeah, me the least, but we've all done things we're not supposed to. And that basically has had an effect on our looks. Once we do things we're supposed to, we'll look better. If you join us, you look better too. But if you keep saying, for example, if you talk too much as a girl, you acquire those lines, beside, your that connect your lips to your nose, you know, like those jaw lines. As a man, you are supposed to acquire that look. To be two baby faces of man is also what you're not supposed to look like. So it looks like talking a lot will create the look that man wants, and talking as low as possible creates the look that a girl wants. We're looking for men who look like men and girls look like girls. There are too many girls. I mean, Alexandra, who's not quite a daughter of mine, but she's doing great actually. She's well on the way, right? That's how I put it. She basically took a photograph which looked so extremely masculine. I'm like, okay, what are they doing to you? But it looks like they want her to look like a man. They want mannish looking girls, like girls with like short hair, like they did the same thing in the 1920s, and they want boys who like, soy boys, like, as they call them, who wear like, shirts with like, three buttons open, you know, like who have like, like this really long hair. Maybe they did that stuff in the 80s and the six, and such. The hippie era. Who like are very flamboyant. They want them to look more feminine. There's feminine side to get in touch with for sure. There's some ups to that, but mostly men are supposed to look at men and women are supposed to look at women. Now, if we don't do that, you end up looking funny to like all of us. But it looks like we're all trying to like hide amongst people who will turn on you, like they're turning on me. Right now I have a special place I'm living where Accra, Ghana, where they can't basically hunt me down and like take me to a special place and end me, right? No, they can't really end me, but like because it happened to me as a child, they took me away and they couldn't end me and they all had to die for that. But I don't want to basically explain how much pain I went through to survive. It's work. It's a trick, really, to survive. To survive what they did to me. A trick. So, in this kind of case, I'm somewhere where they're not reading, and even if they could read me, I send them letters that should frighten them about what writers can do. Nothing of the sort. They have their own kind of idea of what life is made up, and it's not made of writers and their power. As for those in the crowd who read me, there's still not enough of them to say, okay, like America, we'd, find you saying something controversial about anything in Ghana and like, come for you. Like, if I simply insulted the president enough, perhaps the security force will come and give me a talking to, or take away my computer, or something like that. It wouldn't be a case of, let's say, being arrested for like thousands of years. That's not Ghana. That's not what we do here. Other African countries a little bit more like that, but Ghana not really. We worked hard in Ghana for that reason. Writers are safer in Ghana than Nigeria, for example. Right? It goes on to some extra detail, but the idea is that I'm somewhere safe where I can do all this writing for all of us, and eventually we can all leave safe, and start to talk to the people around us, and not worry about being harassed or even killed for being honest about how we feel about people. So yeah, beauty, right? If you're just simply doing the right thing, you'll get the beautiful looks you're looking for. If that's out of range, you just have to wait for the opportunity to be who you are to the world. Mostly, we're acquiring a certain kind of psychological beauty, like, well read, soft spoken, meek mostly, but honest and funny, you know? And you see, then the sort of the issue of people who are neither of those two, if at least you can't be attractive as a mind and just as a person to be with. Joe Pesci, for example, knows he did something wrong. He has to basically, account for that in this lifetime. But he's a person you want to be with. He's fun to talk to, and he wants to basically tell the world about his mistake, so that he can basically be a leader to all sorts of people who aren't doing the right thing by choosing to be short. And so if it looks like he's not the person to get angry about someone making fun of his height, no, he has his own way of basically playing off the scene and making a scene of two as opposed to one person, getting pummeled by a funnier guy until the guy like runs off the stage, and leaves a person who's funny, to sort of turn to the audience and make a laugh on him and then continue. He's not going to be that funny. I'm a hard scene partner to survive, but he's done pretty well. At this point, you can see I'm not really laughing at him. But of course, at some point, I get the better of the exchange, and he has to sort of like allow me to laugh at him, right? But not a whole lot. I happened to the same thing last night. I made some fun of Dwayne the Rock Johnson, right? But he's also in a situation where he's not being allowed to do what he wants. He's not supposed to be working out that hard in his 50s or 60s. But that's how he makes money. At some point, just like Arnold, he's going to have a muscle collapse and look very funny. But like, I'm trying to basically prevent much more of this from going on until we all have the means. Like we said, we all want honest work, endless amounts of honest work. We have to basically win carefully from large swathes of the population. I can't just convince one person about it. So I have to convince a whole lot of people through my writing and my computer programs. So yeah, finally, I'm going to talk about this, beauty in the road less traveled. You know, if you have, let's say, two sphinxes, let's do some ancient Egyptian thought experiments. So suppose there's a sphinx, some sort of like an entrance to a temple. You have the two arms, that sort of like, jut out into the sands. And yeah, if you walk between them, you sort of enter through like the breastplate of this animal and go and talk to, the priests, and the scholars and their libraries inside. Now, if you're given a chance to like look at two sphinx, they're not going to look exactly the same. One will look more beautiful to you than the other. Which one would you go to? It just seems like it's supposed to be some sort of a simulation of a person who you could talk to. Just the architecture alone. That's basically what architecture is supposed to be, that powerful. So yeah, if you compare, let's see, I was doing this as a thought experiment before I started to talk about this and wrote this down later after I thought it was a stressful topic for this particular episode. But yeah, you have, let's say, Eddie Murphy and Michael Jordan. Eddie has a certain kind of. If you look at him in Coming to America, he has a certain kind of a smooth, you know, not too girly, but definitely a smooth, kind of look, like a sort of young, Ghanaian, you know, senior high school kind of guy, who knows not to say too much. He sort of remain quiet in a room and just sort of, wait to be spoken to before speaking. And that's sort of the vibe he has at the beginning of the movie. If you contrast him to Jordan, Jordan has a little bit more. If you've seen him act, and be like on television, he has a bit more of an animated, not too animated, but he's a bit more lively in a certain way. You know, honestly, you call Eddie the pretty boy, and Michael Jordan more handsome, although Jordan's not really getting the sort of like life he wants to be able to be as handsome as he thinks he can possibly be, right? And life changes, so what you have to do to stay, on track changes too. But there's a certain kind of sense that he's built like a tank. His face is built like a tank, So you want to basically suggest you're going to like pick a shape of skull to like model a defensive building out of. You definitely pick Michael Jordan's face as opposed to picking Eddie Murphy's face. And let's say, and so if you had the Sphinxes had either their heads attached to them, it would seem like it's some sort of a beauty contest requires a little bit of seriousness, a little bit of a sophistication to win. As I mean, it reminds me of some sort of a project they had. They gave people in a magazine back in the Maynard Keynes days. It was like probably the early 1900s. Even before that, who knows? Even the 1800s, late 1800s. But anyway, the magazines used to print photographs of, like 10 local girls and ask people to sort them by order of beauty. And whoever guesses the averages, or the mean person's idea of who the most beautiful person is, all the way to the least beautiful person out of the 10, whoever gets the least amount of deviation from the average wins a prize. So of course you're not going to vote for what you think is the most beautiful yourself. You're going to vote for what you understand from the winners and losers of the previous weeks. You just keep buying the magazine. You eventually get some sense of who the people in that particular town think are beautiful. So of course you put a black girl there, she'll get last. Put an Asian girl there, she might get ninth. If there's a black girl there too, you basically can figure out some system to basically see if you can make money on how good you are as an artist. It looks like you're supposed to imagine that beauty is a sophisticated thing to get interested in. So if you meant in a certain way, you might ask who's hotter, Jordan or Eddie Murphy. A lot of people say Eddie Murphy. Man, he was like such a good-looking guy and raw and delirious, and coming to America. But if you have a certain kind of eye for like, yes, yeah. So that was something I was trying to do with my phone. Anyway, so yeah, the idea of the two swings is basically what I'm going to try and introduce you to. That these two swings are going to be important tests for everybody. You have to pick who the most beautiful one is. And yeah, you just get this sense that it's not going to be an answer you can memorize from a cheat sheet or anything like that. It comes down to you personally, like who do you find more beautiful? And that is supposed to be a guide to who you go towards. And so that kind of test is basically talked about in a Robert Frost poem called The Road Not Taken. I read it out to you, and that's the last thing I'll say before signing out. Yes, it's one of those, but to say that would basically be a bit complicated for people. But let's say it's a depth first search. Yes, that's all I get to say. So, The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Two roads diverge in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. 1 second though, I'm gonna basically make. Yes. Let's start again. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, and leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Signing out, your Mehdi Hassan Abudu.